Welcome to Hidden Gem or Hidden Trash. This time we're gonna talk about some really hard games here. Our first contender is Code of Princess, a role-playing adventure in the form of a beat-em-up. Originally released on the 3DS, later ported to the Switch. This version went up in difficulty, especially with some of the bosses, so let's find out the positive and the negative about it. Code of Princess is an eye-candy action RPG with probably one of the most overly sexualized female characters ever created. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, it's entirely up to you. Even though the story is a dumb-ass comedy, its silliness is often overshadowed by some interesting plot elements. Meaning it will not always be a comedy, the game's true core, however, is the beat-em-up action. It takes place in a semi-2D environment, but within layers. You have to move your characters inside of them in order to properly attack your enemies. It's all a matter of bashing your controller to create combos to beat the crap out of everybody, but in a technical way. This gives the game a sense of strategy and skill, adding a lot to the fun. It's a game with many different playable characters, obviously offering huge variety in gaming styles. Graphics are nice, music is nice, sometimes with really cool themes. The Switch version offers a 2-player co-op mode, meaning you can just sit down with somebody else and play the entire game together. Its positive traits are then great battle system, neat visuals and sound, port with a co-op mode, tons of playable characters, and a funny story. I had to admit that while the overall plot is interesting, regardless of its comedic nature, sometimes it's just too dumb. Certain scenes will just feel awkward, overly cliched, and beyond stupid. It shouldn't really bother anybody, but they can be a bit of a pain to watch. I praise the battle system because I personally enjoyed it. However, it's not your everyday beat 'em up, nope. It's highly technical and getting your attacks and skills to work, or even to hit properly, can be a chore. It's still awesome if you manage to get into it, but its clunkiness can increase the difficulty and frustration. Learning how to move to the layers will annoy you sometimes, as almost always you need to be in the right one to attack. Difficulty spikes are there since the 3DS version, however, they became more notorious in the Switch port. The negative traits are, story can have some really awkward and stupid moments, controls are kinda clunky, meaning it can be a little bit hard to get into, and there are some annoying difficulty spikes. Overall, Code of Princess is a fantastic game, truly a fun adventure in both systems. It just isn't perfect, but hey, what kind of game is perfect anyway? Not your everyday action RPG, but still quite fun to play. Therefore, I deem this game as a hidden gem. Next up on the list is Crystalis. Originally released on the NES, then ported recently to the Switch with some Nintendo collections. Just by being a game from that console should let you know it is a hard title. So let's find out its positive and negative aspects. Crystalis has a simple but quite interesting story, one of the first JRPGs ever to mix science fiction with medieval aspects, including cryogenic sleep and a nuclear war. It is a post-apocalyptic world. It doesn't really focus on its plot elements, but the game still follows the narrative until the end. As an early action RPG, we have to forgive some clunky aspects, such as having to charge your sword before you attack from a distance, or to be in the right layer, same as the enemies, to properly hit them. Once you get used to this, it can be quite fun. Music in this game is okay, but there are a few themes that do stand out like crazy. Notice the advanced graphics? Yup, that means this game was technologically ahead of its time. The positive is awesome visuals, some very memorable themes, neat battle system, and, for a game of its time, a very interesting story. The game being hard is no surprise since it's an NES title, but its difficulty can be frustrating sometimes, not because of its challenge, but because of the controls. Granted, I said before it has an excuse for being retro, but that doesn't condone some clunky details such as the ones I mentioned. Due to this fact, some of the bosses can be a little unnerving. Exploration in Crystalis can also be quite a chore, trying to find out where the hell to go next or how to get there in the first place. It's just very cryptic sometimes. Which means playing this game nowadays will sometimes lead you to a walkthrough. The negative then is, the game has some outdated details in its gameplay mechanics that can be a pain in the ass nowadays. That's really all the negative aspects it has, but I am aware it can turn down a lot of people. Nonetheless, Crystalis is a true cult classic from the NES, an influential game from many action RPGs, obviously underrated. Therefore, I deem this game as a hidden gem. The next contender is Baroque, a weird action RPG on the PS2 and the Nintendo Wii. This is one of the hardest JRPGs I've ever played, mainly due to its roguelike features. It's a remake of a PS1 and Sega Saturn game we never got. Time to find out the positive and negative aspects about it. I'm a huge fan of dark stories, so the entire atmosphere and premise of this game sucked me in from the beginning. It threw me there and it bothered me, but I couldn't resist going forward just to try to find out what the hell was going on. Plus, it revolves around religion mixed with strong horror elements. I read it was a roguelike RPG before I played it, but it doesn't really feel that way sometimes. Sure, the enemies move if you do, however, you can just walk around and fight them from any angle, so it gives you that freedom like any action RPG. Graphics are neat for a PS2 title, and the music sometimes is freaking amazing. Very fitting for such a twisted and dark game. The positive aspects are as follows: great soundtrack, excellent premise, dark visuals, and freedom of movement. I mentioned this game doesn't bind you like a normal roguelike RPG, but you're still stuck in a bunch of areas with terrible sense of direction. The camera is bad here. Not as bad as in other games, but it can give you a headache sometimes. Or it can give your enemies the advantage. Its difficulty is extremely frustrating because if you die, you go back to the beginning, but dying is all a part of the plot. So you need to die! Time to go once again through some randomly generated shitty areas. Now, only some of the visuals are interesting, such as the character and monster design, but everything else feels so boring and depressing. Dungeons are so dark you can barely see sometimes, which only helps into getting you lost. Last but not least, the controls. Oh my god, are they horseshit. This is clunkiness at its worst. Even running around it's awkward sometimes. Collision detection seems acceptable, but far from good or satisfying. And those are most of the reasons why this game is so hard, but in a bad sense. The negative aspects are as follows: very clunky controls, bad camera, poor dungeon visuals, poorly executed difficulty, and boring, repetitive gameplay. Baroque truly has some interesting ideas put into it, but the execution of most of its gameplay mechanics is convoluted and irritating. I really wanted to like this game. Therefore, and sadly, I deem this game as hidden trash. The last contender in this video is a true roguelike RPG known as Izuna, the Legend of the Unemployed Ninja. Just like any of the games in that genre, this is also very hard. Time to find out the good and the bad about it. Izuna is a very funny comedy, one that swarms with charisma in a colorful anime-styled world. The protagonist herself is very interesting to follow, especially since she's well unemployed. Roaming around the town feels well-paced as you get acquainted to it rather fast. In terms of music, it's nothing special, but some tunes are good nonetheless. Now, As a roguelike, it definitely delivers what it has to, as you go around exploring the dungeons, moving while the enemies move too, and finding items that you need to manage strategically. What I like about the gameplay mechanics is that they're friendly. Dungeons aren't swarming with monsters, Izuna can recover HP quickly, the pacing as you advance from one area to another is balanced. In other words, being a roguelike makes it very hard, but with enough time to get used to it and enjoy it. Positive features are very funny characters, charismatic story, friendly gameplay mechanics, and some catchy music themes. Roguelike RPGs are niche, and I mean very niche. Given their repetitive nature, it's a genre that automatically has something negative with every single title. Izuna is very friendly, however, but it just feels shallow in some areas with lame difficulty spikes. It can be a bit of a pain to fight the bosses, since you have to find them or encounter them in a convenient location, so the strategies can be convoluted sometimes. Losing in a dungeon at any time means losing all your items and going back to level 1. But hey, that's every roguelike RPG for you. Negative features are, the game can feel very repetitive, boss fights can be annoying sometimes, and difficulty spikes are just weird. Izuna is a very fun adventure, too bad it has a lot of ups and downs like any roguelike RPG. In conclusion, this is a pretty solid and funny game, but only for those who enjoy the genre. Therefore, and with that in mind, I deem this game as a hidden gem. That is all for this episode of Hidden Gem or Hidden Trash. As always, I encourage you to play them and decide for yourself if they're good or bad. Let's meet again in the future with even more crazy contenders. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time!